down. So you need to take some stale bread from the freezer. So you need to take some stale bread that maybe you kept in the freezer for a while, and to defrost it, you put a little water on it, and then you squeeze it with your hands to get the excess water out. And then you want to add this to your chopped meat and break it up into chunks. So after adding 1 egg to approximately a pound of chopped meat, you're going to crumble up your moistened old bread, and that will help keep the meatballs moist inside as you fry them and cook them. And you just have to kind of eyeball, after you mix them up like this, see how much chunks of white bread you have in there. And you have some chopped meat, like a pound of chopped meat with like a half a piece of Italian bread, softened and mushed up into chunks. About that ratio is about good. Then you're going to add a little parsley and a little raw garlic, very, very little raw garlic, and salt and pepper, and mix again. You're going to pinch the leaves off the end of the parsley and throw the stem away, and with these few leaves, you know, a small handful, rinse them off like that, dry them in a paper towel, and then you're going to chop them finely along with your minced garlic. If you don't have a garlic press, which will give you this tiny, tiny bit of garlic, you could just chop it up with a knife really tiny and maybe mush it down and get it really, really small so that in any bite of meatball, nobody gets a chunk of garlic. You can use as much or as little parsley as you like, depending on how much you like or don't like parsley. I like parsley. I like to make sure when I put the garlic in here that I sort of spread it out throughout the whole bunch of meat so that it doesn't all end up again in one spot, even if it's tiny. And there's that. And then you're going to add just a little salt and pepper. Salt, pepper, and start to mix. And make sure that everything goes through your fingers like that so that the chopped meat and the bread and all the parsley gets moved around pretty well, and the salt and pepper, so that each meatball is going to taste the same. Okay, once your meatballs are all, once your chopped meat is all mixed together in a large bowl, get yourself a separate dish to lay out the meatballs on until you're ready to put them in the frying pan. So you can make meatballs again any size you like. I try to take a small handful, about the size of my palm, and then we have to pack them so that they stay nice and tight while you're frying them, which that's what the egg is doing. But, you know, pack them tight like this, pushing down, and then roll and try to form them in the shape of a ball. And there you go. And continue until done. Okay, so from a pound of chopped meat and a little bit of bread, I have about 13 meatballs here. You know, you might get 12 or more depending on how large you make them. So this is about a good sized meatball that I like. And then what I'm going to do is set them aside. They can either go in the fridge or just on the counter, cover them until you get your sauce going. And then you'll fry them and put them in the sauce. So for now, set the meatballs aside and get ready to start your sauce. Before starting your pot of sauce, what you do is you take some of your sausages and any other meat you want to add in. This is a piece of beef spare rib. You could add a piece of pork spare rib, anything just to add a little extra flavor to the sauce. And what I'll do is I'll put this in the oven and roast it till it's just slightly brown, and then chop it up and put it in my sauce. But I won't cook it from raw in the sauce. It'll be slightly cooked before I put it in. So here we are, we're putting our other meat in the oven, and maybe we'll put it on 400 degrees roast. It's not going to stay in there for very long, and just watch it. So while the sausages and other meat are browning in the oven, you can open all your cans of tomatoes and tomato sauce. I use 4 cans of whole peeled plum tomatoes. I generally get the ones that are imported from Italy. It doesn't matter the brand. So you want 4 of whole tomatoes and 2 cans of sauce and 1 small can of paste. And now you're going to take your tomatoes, your whole tomatoes, and actually put them through a blender or a food processor and whip them a little to just not have your sauce be very chunky with large pieces of tomato. It will be much smoother and nicer on your pasta. Generally, there's a piece of basil that's packed in with the whole tomatoes. It really has lost most of its flavor. It sort of flavored the tomatoes in the can. I just take that out and throw that away. I do not whip it up in my tomatoes in my blender. Before you start whipping your whole tomatoes, you want to poke your finger in them and get most of the juice and seeds out, and not have that go in your blender because it will make the sauce watery. Now I'm putting these tomatoes into my little food blender here. You want to go about halfway up or 3/4 of the way up the jar so they have room to spin around while they whip up. After you whip your tomatoes, you're going to keep pouring the whipped up part into a bowl and hold it until you're actually making your sauce, and then you just pour it all into the pot at once, and it makes things go a little faster. Ready? After about 15 or 20 minutes on 400 degrees bake or roast, this is what the sausage and beef will look like. And it's ready to come out of the oven and sit, and soon you'll chop it up and put it in your sauce. Getting ready to chop up my onions and garlic. I'm going to use really like 1/4 of a large onion. This is a medium to large onion. If it was a very small onion, I would say use half. But this should be fine for this size sauce pot. So you're going to take your onion and very carefully slice it long ways. You want to, at the end, have some little cubes or chunks, and then turn it this way, and again, carefully keeping your fingers out of the way. Chop up your onions, and that's plenty for this size sauce pot. Cloves of garlic, about this much. I really like to mince it and never have a chunk of garlic in my food. I would recommend that you go get a garlic press in order to accomplish this. Okay. I wash up a little more parsley now, again a small handful, and you know, pinch it off at the stem. And just again, chop this up as small or as large as you like. Parsley adds a lot of flavor. So you want to start with parsley, and then at the end we'll probably add a little bit more. And now we're going to start to put our sauce together. In your sauce pot, turn it on, start to heat up. Pass the olive oil around the bottom there until it's sort of filled in the whole bottom. And then wait for it to get a little bit warm, medium to high heat. And the first thing that's going to go in is your onions. They'll take the longest to soften out of the garlic, onions, and parsley trio. Okay, so now we're going to spread the onions around, make sure they're going to saute evenly in the oil. And they're starting to sizzle, so once they get really soft, even a tiny bit brown around the edges maybe, then you'll throw in the garlic and the parsley, and then the paste. Okay. Just keep watching your heat. You want it to sizzle a little bit, but everybody has a different flame on their stove, so it's hard to judge about high, medium, or low, but the onions are sauteing and they're starting to get soft now. I'll add a little salt and pepper. This is kosher salt, maybe just 2 little fingertips full, and then a little pepper. And again, start to stir it around, get all the flavors melded together. Watch your heat. You don't want these to really get brown and burned. Just nice and soft and mild for a delicious flavor in your sauce. While the onions are on low, you can start chopping up your sausages. You can make large pieces, small pieces. whatever's comfortable for you and the people you're serving. It's very hot still. Ouch. You could see it's not completely cooked inside. It's mildly pink, so that's good. You'll get even more flavors out of it once it goes through the sauce. And this, as long as there's a spot in the bone, I'm going to break in half just to make it easier to toss around when we're mixing our sauce in the pot. Some of the little edges are getting a little brown. They seem to be softening up enough. I'm going to put in the garlic and parsley in just about another 2 seconds. We're really starting to get a little bit brown, so now we're ready to keep moving along. We're going to put the garlic in first, and if you get any garlic skins, you can just scoop that out and move that around. Garlic cooks very fast because the oil's hot and the garlic is already very tiny, and you can really smell that garlic and onions. I'm going to lower the oil again just a little bit, and now we're going to just get this parsley in there. And the tomato paste. I will put like 2/3 of the jar. That's really all you need for this size. You don't need the entire can of paste. It will probably be a little bit too much. It has a very strong concentrated flavor. So, but this will last a long time. You could just put a little cover on it and put it back in the fridge or the freezer for another time. So now the paste is really melting. You want to get it as loose and liquidy as you can before you start adding the rest of your ingredients. So turn it up a little bit, get it moving around. You have to constantly be watching this and mixing and stirring so nothing burns at the bottom of the pan. Okay. So I like to put my tomatoes in first before my tomato sauce. So in just another second, let this mix a little bit more, really loosening up. Okay. Whole peeled Italian tomatoes. And give that a stir. Now everything is cooling off and slowing down. And you want to make sure that's mixed really well. You don't want to turn the heat up too much. But you could start to put in your sausages now. And your other meat. And again, this little beef is optional. The extra beef, I definitely use those sausage and meatballs to flavor the sauce completely. Now I'm adding my sauce, 1 can at a time. Keep mixing. And sometimes I will put a little water. When the can gets toward the bottom, I add a little bit of water from the tap and swirl it around to really get all of the sauce out. Ready? Okay, so we have everything we need in there for now. Your sauce cans, the paste, garlic and onions, and the other meat. And we're going to turn it to like a medium heat and try to get it up to a boil. In the meantime, we're going to take out our meatballs and start frying them. I think by putting them in the fridge, it makes them a little bit, helps them stay together while you're frying them. I like to use a cast iron pot, but a non-stick would be good too if you have. If you don't, they're gonna stick. Canola oil, you want the pan to be a little bit hot, and then you put in the canola oil. Canola oil burns at a slower rate. You want to fill it like that so it's got a nice layer. And then you have to just wait for it to get hot though. There's a trick to see if it is ready to go. If you take the back of a wooden spoon, and when you put it in the oil, it should make bubbles around the edges. So, no bubble yet. So we'll wait. We got it turned up on high. As soon as it gets hot enough, we'll take it down a little bit and then start frying. You can see when you put your wooden spoon in, it starts to bubble around the edges, but actually the whole thing is bubbling at this point, so it's probably plenty hot. Okay. So now you're going to start to fry the meatballs. They get a little flat bottom from sitting on the plate, but that's okay. You want to see a little bubble or hear a little sizzle when you put them in. So as you put the cold meatballs in the frying pan, it's going to lower the temperature of the oil. So you may have to adjust that. If you have an electric stove, that will be more difficult. And you could probably do a good 6 or 7 at a time. We'll just start out with 6. And then as they start to get darker and more brown around the edges from the red meat, you will toss them around with a spoon or a fork of some sort. So there, see, it's already got brown. So the meatballs don't have to be cooked through completely because they're going to boil in the sauce for like 2 hours and cook further. So you just want to get them brown on all edges. And if they get a little dark, that's okay. And once they're brown on all sides, you toss it in the pool. It's just starting to bubble up a little bit. Keep stirring this so nothing sticks to the bottom. So I keep rolling these around in the pan to make sure they're browned on all sides. You see this still has a little bit of pink over here and over here. So I'm trying to, and it's hard, you know, they're not really round. And they roll over and tip over, so I push it down a little bit. It's fine.
Light spots on it.
Bunch is nice and brown. If you have a fork, you could poke it. If you have a spoon, you could use a spoon. Maybe I'll get a little spoon. So very carefully, you know, you want to lower the oil, maybe a drop. Very carefully, you're going to put them just one by one right into the sauce. And so, like I said, they will boil in the sauce for, you know, at least 2 hours. Okay. The oil is really hot. You're going to immediately put the rest of your meatballs in here, which will lower the temperature of the oil pretty quickly because the meatballs are cold. And give the sauce a stir. Make sure those meatballs are up from the bottom if they sink. And yeah, be careful. I guess you don't want to break up the meatballs. They're not really fully cooked yet. Okay. Now same with the second batch. Or if you make double the amount of chopped meat, you would do this, you know, 4 or 5 times. Sometimes I make, you know, 25 to 35 meatballs in a much bigger pot of sauce. We're going to shut the oil off and put in the rest of the meatballs. And then you're going to let this come to a boil and then continuously stir for like 2 hours.
Not continuously.
Well, on and off again.
Occasionally.
You don't want anything to stick to the bottom of the pot, which is a serious risk here of things sticking to the bottom of the pot. So I'm going to turn it up a little bit. Once it gets to a good boil, I'm going to lower it and let it simmer. And then all along is when you're going to be tasting it to see how much extra salt or pepper or even another little small can of tomato sauce you might need to have that just perfect big sauce flavor. Cut. So the sauce is coming to a boil now, and you know, my pot is not a very heavy pot and my flame is pretty high, and even though it's on low, it's still boiling. I really don't want it to boil for 2 hours. I just want it to simmer, and I don't want anything to burn on the bottom. So a simple solution is just to raise your pot up away from the flame. So how you can do that is you could just move it over, and if you have a diffuser, which is one of these, this is a great thing to temper the heat away from the pot. If not, you could just raise your whole pot up and put it on 2 burners, and that just takes it a little bit further away from the flame so you could slowly simmer your sauce. Okay, cover a skew like that, and that helps the steam go away and less bubbling will go on. Okay, cut. Okay, so earlier when we were separating our whole tomatoes, we were leaving the juice behind because it's a little bit watery, but some of the cans, actually the juice is a little bit thicker. So what I did is I'm gonna now strain that juice that we have left over from earlier, just to get rid of all the seeds and other things. So you see all the seeds are left over, and then I'm gonna take some of this tomato juice and pour it into my sauce, just to add that little bit of extra flavor and a little bit of extra liquid so that your meatballs are floating a little bit better and not, you know, so tightly packed together. Okay, so now we've added a little bit more of the tomato juice and puree from the cans that was left over. Give it a little mix and taste it. I'm tasting it and it tastes a little bland, so I know it needs a little bit more salt and pepper now, and this is when I'll also put in some oregano. So at this time you could use some kosher salt, which generally adds flavor without putting too much saltiness into your dish. So that was about 3 little pinches. And then the pepper, I'm just going to shake the pepper. I kind of put it right on the top there so I see what's going on before it sinks in. So I got salt, I got pepper, and I do the same with oregano. I kind of just make a little pile of it there, and I, you know, sort of see it on the surface. And then I give it a mix in. So at this point, it's taken us about an hour and 15 minutes to come to this point, or about an hour. The sauce has been cooking for about a half an hour, and we're gonna cover it now and really just every, you know, 10 minutes, just check it and make sure that it's not sticking to the bottom. But it is a process. You have to let this really cook through. All the meat needs to boil through into the sauce to get that good flavor. In about another half an hour, taste it again. If you need more salt and pepper, add it. Also, if it doesn't have quite enough flavor for you and it needs a little extra punch, you can put in one of these little tiny cans of sauce, because these cans come with a lot of flavor in them. So about this size would be fine to add a little bit more, just to get that little bit of extra flavor if you don't feel it's flavorful enough. Okay, so it's been about 2 hours since everything was put into the pot, and it's been boiling a little bit, and I've been stirring it to keep it, you know, as low simmer as possible. The main idea of the slow simmer is to get all the juices out of the meat into the sauce, and also to make sure the meatballs are fully cooked, because in the frying pan, you know, they're just browned on the outside. So I've tasted it a couple of times. I added a little bit of salt and pepper each step of the way. You can add kosher salt and also regular salt, because that really has the saltiness to it more than the kosher salt. And at the end, I add maybe like another sprig of parsley just for flavor. And you know, you can let it simmer just another few minutes and then turn it off, and you're ready to make macaroni or spaghetti or any other kind of pasta that you like, and serve it up. Bon appetit!